is that some of the young people involved in this lifestyle and what we saw over the last 4 days is coming from exactly the same kind of background. You know, we're growing in a society where I think David Cameron doesn't understand that the cutbacks that he's done, that his policies have introduced, i.e. the cutbacks, the lack of apprenticeships, the lack of hope, has kind of bred an underclass in this society. Now, don't get me wrong, we're not justifying violence or looting or attempted murder or anything like that. What we're saying is that you've got to look behind why some of these young people, we're talking about 10, 11 and 12-year-old young men who were involved in criminal activity. This wasn't just by chance. This has been brewing for some time. And I think what happens is politicians are so distant from the community, the local community, and our community leaders are so distant from it, where TAG fills in that gap in the sense of the way we are dealing with some of these kind of hardcore gangsters. We've realised that these guys are coming from broken homes, and I know a lot of people don't like to hear this, but if you've grown up in a society where your mum's a teenage mum, so she had the child at 14, she then has another child for a different man at another age, that child grows up with no father in the house. He has no moral understanding, no discipline, because the mother herself was a teenager when she had him. It makes it difficult for that young man to kind of find his feet, because he's got no real sense of direction. But then, if you couple that with the whole estate or the whole area growing up in that same environment, and on top of it, the cutbacks that David Cameron's government has introduced, many redundancies, lack of real hope, and some of the guys we're speaking to on the streets are saying that the Olympics, which were supposed to offer this sort of glimmer of hope, i.e. apprenticeships, never materialised. So some of these guys are like, well, if the Olympics can't offer us a way out, what else can we do? Now, again, I want people to not judge what we're saying and be upset by what we're saying. I want us to look behind these guys and understand that if you have a broken society or broken family, then there's no way on earth can you then turn around to those same broken families and say, we need you to take control of your children. Because a broken family can't take control of the children, because most of these mothers are scared of the children. We know we're working with young men that beat up their mums, that bully up their mums, that intimidate their mums. We're talking about men that are 5'9", 5'7", big muscly guys who intimidate their mums to the point where the mum just rather sees them out the house than put up with the kind of problems they're going to give inside the house. Now, again,
what's happened for that child to have so little respect for her mother, for their mother, that they will behave
because
that
they've
way?
seen the mum being abused by other men. They've seen in Gavin's cases, you know, it's the same things happened in his life. When you see constant abuse on the woman in your life, which happens to be your mum, you then think, well, that's a normal way of life. You begin to kind of take on board, well, that's standard, because he's seen the abuse in the house. This is domestic violence. So what I'm saying is this, it's our organisation, what we do, we look behind. The reason why we have so many success with, and the success of Gavin and many others like Gavin, is because we look behind the person, the anger, the facade, the gun, the knife, the drugs. We look behind all of that, and we look and realise that each of these young people are young children, vulnerable. Most of these children are exploited, manipulated by older gang members who, again, where the enforcement should come in to deal with the older gang members, they don't, because there's not enough intel on them. So our work is about dealing with the vulnerability about these guys. We don't look at the surface, which is the looting, the robberies, the fires. We don't look at that. That's surface. And another thing we've got to
say it's surface, you know, but it really frightens and intimidates a lot of people who don't come from broken homes,
yes,
who have worked hard to achieve what they have.
Okay.
You know, we spoke to a chap yesterday who'd worked, you know, 20 hours a day for 10 years to build up his restaurant business. It was pogged by kids who really should have known better.
And as Gavin said, we send out our prayers to that family, and we totally accept that. What we have realised is that in the last 2 years, we've had over 20 murders in our inner city estates. I've never seen the government ever cry over that. I've never seen the government actually have this kind of profile in the way they're saying, we need to look at what's going on with our young people. We live in areas where young people are stabbed, shot, and girls are gang raped on a regular basis. And yet, because of the looting over the last 4 days, which we totally are against, We have seen more people cry over material things than the life of a young person. I've gone to so many funerals of young people who've died at the age of 14 for being shot, who've died at the age of 16 for being for not selling the right drugs, so the drug dealer comes in and gets involved and does some damage to that person. We've seen girls being gang raped on a frequent basis, but yet Boris Johnson, David Cameron has never, ever raised the profile of how are we going to deal with this culture of violence that is going on in our inner city estates. We cannot be a society that put material goods as far more important than the life of a young man who dies at the hands of another young man.
Are we not talking about two very separate issues? I haven't forgotten you. I'm going to come back to you in just a second. But have we not rather forgotten that there are two separate issues? One of them is that certainly what you're saying, we very much appreciate that young people are being killed, and it looks as though it's perhaps two tiers. As there are more tears over some than there are over others. I hear that, but when I was in Ealing yesterday, a lot of the people were saying the kids that were there had their new trainers on, had their iPhones, had their Blackberries, and they were just communicating with each other. So those young people, many of the young people that are rioting at the moment are not necessarily because of those circumstances that you're talking about.
I would disagree with that. I think Ealing's a very small sample figure here, because most of the boroughs, if you looked at the boroughs it took place, apart from Ealing and Clapham, which is a well-to-do areas, most of them, Croydon has got good parts and got bad parts. Peckham, Brixton has still got, has got, but some worse than some.
Yes.
And so my thing is this: I'm not in any way saying for 1 second that what happened over the last 4 days is any justification here. What we're saying is that we as people.
What I'm asking you is there any connection though? And from what we saw, there isn't necessarily.
I think. Not necessarily. I think what you find is you're going to find, as me and Gavin spoke about, young people just participating for the sake of it. We agree that I accept that, and I accept there's going to be a lot of young people that just did it for the fun of it. But also, in line with that, because of the nature of our work and the young people we work with, unlike other organisations, we work with a lot of hardcore gangsters or so-called gangsters, and many of them are coming from a background which is very similar to Gavin, and some worse than Gavin's, where I can't just look at the surface, but I've got to look behind the person and look at the heart of the man and look behind it and the mindset. That's why we've developed programs specifically challenging them to think about their behaviour. Rather than we say to them, stop selling drugs, we get them to understand and recognise the damage drugs does, which then makes them want to stop selling drugs on their own fruition. We think that it's far better for us to have a society where hope is the main focus here, where young people have aspirations. At this present moment in time, we can't say to these young people, for sure, there's plenty of jobs out there, there isn't. We can't say there's no apprenticeships, there isn't.
Yeah.
And we certainly are not saying to school leavers, if you do well in school, you're going to come out to a great job. So we've got to understand, if you don't present them with opportunities...
But you don't have to be an underprivileged black kid for that to be the case, though,
Definitely
do you?
not.
Okay, I just want to come back
to...
Yeah, of course. I want to come back to Gavin as well, though. Tell me about your life now.
Like I said, I'm born again Christian, studying at